He bled behind her barn, with no name, no past, just eyes full of fear. She saved him, then he vanished. 2 years later, a millionaire walks into her diner, calls her by name, and reveals a truth she never saw coming. What he says next will shatter everything she thought she knew. Before we dive into this unforgettable journey, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? If stories about love, sacrifice, and second chances speak to your heart, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we're bringing you another powerful story you won't want to miss. The rain came down hard, like the sky had been holding its breath all day and finally let go. Eva tightened the hood of her faded jacket, stepping out onto the creaking porch of her small farmhouse. It was late, close to midnight, and most nights she'd be asleep by now. But something was off tonight. She'd heard it just barely over the hum of the storm, a sound that didn't belong, a low thud, then another, like someone falling, or trying not to. Her boots slopped through the wet earth as she rounded the corner of the barn, flashlight in hand. The beam cut through sheets of rain until it caught movement. A figure slumped against the weathered boards. Male, soaked to the bone, blood leaking from a gash at his temple. Eva froze. "Hey, are you?" Her voice was lost to thunder. She took a cautious step closer. His eyes flickered open, no words, just pain and something else, desperation. She should have called someone, the sheriff, the paramedics, anyone. But she didn't. Instead, Eva dropped to her knees beside him. "Can you walk?" she asked. He didn't answer, just winced as he tried to move. "I'll help," she muttered, more to herself than him. Somehow, she got his arm over her shoulder and half-dragged him to the house, slipping more than once in the mud. Inside, she laid him on the guest bed, her mother's old room. He shivered violently, so she stripped off his soaked clothes and pulled the quilt over him. Then she cleaned the cut on his head with trembling hands, trying to remember what her mom once taught her about first aid. Still, he said nothing. Eva brought water, soup. He sipped both without a word. The storm outside roared on, but inside it was quiet, except for the occasional cough from the man in her guest room and the pounding of her own heart. By morning, the bleeding had stopped. His breathing was steadier. She didn't ask questions. Not on day 1, or day 2. Instead, Eva made sure he had food, warm towels, a safe place to rest. She told the nosy locals he was her cousin from out of town. When 2 deputies came snooping around asking about a man who might be hiding, she stood on her porch with arms crossed and eyes steely. "Heard of anyone?" he said flatly. "Try the next farm over." They eventually left. The man, still nameless, watched her from the window that night. His eyes softer now, grateful. She didn't ask why he was on the run. She only asked if he wanted more soup. He nodded. And that was enough for now. By the 3rd day, the color returned to his face. The wound above his brow had scabbed, though it would scar. He still didn't speak much. Eva learned to read his gratitude in small gestures. A quiet nod when she brought him tea, the way his eyes lingered on hers a little longer each morning, or how he folded the blankets perfectly when she stepped out for a moment. Eva didn't press. Silence was familiar in her world. Since her parents passed, quiet had been her only companion. Quiet afternoons serving travelers in the small diner she ran off the main road. And now, somehow, this stranger had become part of that rhythm. One evening, she found him standing by the porch, watching the golden light spill over the fields. He held her gaze when she joined him, but said nothing. They just stood there, side by side, listening to the cicadas rise with the dusk. The next day, a sheriff's cruiser rolled past slowly. She felt him tense behind her. "You're not here for you," she murmured. But he stayed in the shadows until the vehicle disappeared down the road. That night, he finally spoke. "Are you helping me?" His voice was hoarse, like it hadn't been used in weeks. Eva hesitated, placing a kettle on the stove. "Because you needed it, and I could." He studied her in the glow of the kitchen light. "You don't even know who I am." "No," she said, pouring him tea. "But I know you didn't flinch when the dog barked." I know you try to keep your boots by the door so you don't track dirt inside. And you always finish your food, she smiled faintly. That's enough for me. He blinked, and something behind his eyes softened. For a moment, it felt like the world had slowed down just for them. The next morning, Eva awoke early as usual. The sun had barely risen when she walked to the kitchen to start the coffee. But something felt off, too quiet even for her quiet life. She knocked gently on the guest room door. No response. Opening it slowly, her heart sank. The bed was made, the quilt folded neatly at the foot, and on the pillow, a folded piece of paper. She picked it up, hands trembling. In small, careful handwriting it read, "Thank you. You saved more than my life." Beneath the note lay a small pin, a silver lapel crest, military in design, though aged and weathered. Eva sat on the edge of the bed, fingers tracing the note again and again. He was gone. No tracks in the mud, no sign of where he went. Just gone. That day, she moved through her chores like a ghost, feeding the animals, wiping down diner tables, pouring coffee for the truckers who didn't know anything had changed. But something had. Something deep and invisible. He'd come into her life like a storm, unannounced and chaotic, and somehow left it calmer than before. That night, Eva stood where they'd watched the sunset together. The field stretched quiet before her. She clutched the note in one hand and the pin in the other, pressing them close to her chest. She didn't know who he was, where he'd gone, or why fate had led him to her doorstep. But she knew this. Sometimes, saving a stranger isn't about recognition or reward. It's about the space two broken lives make for each other when the world turns cruel. And somewhere, out there, he was alive. Because of her. And that was enough. The morning sun filtered through the diner's dusty windows, casting long golden streaks across the cracked linoleum floor. Eva wiped her hands on a worn towel, eyeing the register with a sigh. Business had been slow, too slow. The bills were stacked behind the counter like a wall closing in. The foreclosure notice on the fridge at home felt like a ticking clock. 2 years had passed since that stormy night, 2 years of wondering who the stranger had been, 2 years of silence and struggle. She still ran the diner alone, just like she did the farm. Her fingers were rough from lifting crates, her back sore from long shifts, and her smile thinner than it used to be. But she kept going, because that's what her mama taught her, and because the land was all she had left. It was just past noon when the sleek black car rolled in. Not a local, too polished, too quiet. The engine purred like money. Eva's brow furrowed. She was wiping down the pie display when the door opened, and a tall man in a tailored coat stepped inside. Every eye in the diner turned to him. He didn't seem to notice the attention. His gaze scanned the place until it landed on her. He walked straight up to the counter and said, "1 slice of peach pie, the homemade kind." His voice was low, steady, polished, but there was something familiar about it, like a song she couldn't place. Eva blinked. Coming right up. She turned to plate the pie, heart thumping for reasons she couldn't explain. When she set it in front of him, their eyes met. And then he said it. "Eva, you found me behind your barn." Her breath caught. He smiled faintly. 2 years ago, it was raining. You dragged me inside, cleaned me up. I never forgot." She stared at him, her hands frozen on the counter. He looked nothing like the man she'd saved. Back then, he'd been gaunt, bleeding, silent. This man was power wrapped in polish, his jaw clean-shaven, his clothes expensive, his voice certain. But those eyes, those haunted, grateful eyes, were the same. "You're him," she whispered. "From the barn?" He gave a small nod. "Gabriel Cross." The name hit like thunder. Even in their small corner of the world, she'd heard it. Tech tycoon, reclusive billionaire. Whispers of a rise from nowhere. He wasn't just rich, he was a symbol. One of those men you read about in newspapers, never expecting to meet. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice shaky. "I came to find you," he replied, "to repay what I owe." She pulled back slightly. "You don't owe me anything. I did what anyone would have done." He shook his head. "No, not anyone. You didn't ask who I was. You didn't call the police. You helped me, not knowing what trouble I could have." She looked down. "You were hurt. That's all I saw. And you gave me a second chance," he said. "Now let me return the favor." Eva stepped back. "I don't need your money." His lips twitched into a half smile. "That's not what I'm offering. I'm offering to help." Eva folded her arms across her chest, narrowing her eyes. "Help how?" Gabriel glanced around the diner. "This place has character, heart. But it's falling apart." Her jaw tightened. "I know." "I'm not here to pity you," he said, his tone respectful. "But I've spent millions fixing companies that didn't deserve it. You saved my life. Let me fix a diner that does." Her pride bristled. "I didn't save you so you'd come back and act like I can't stand on my own." "I know you can," he said softly. "That's why I'm here. Because you shouldn't have to." Eva turned away, pretending to clean the coffee machine. "You think just because you've got money, you can swoop in and patch up the world with it?" "No," he replied. "I think I owe a debt. Not because I have money, but because for the first time in my life, someone saw me as a person instead of a name." That stopped her. He continued, "You gave me a bed when I was bleeding. You asked for nothing. You protected me when you didn't even know if I was dangerous. I walked away without telling you the truth. That wasn't fair." She stayed quiet, struggling with the knot forming in her throat. "I'm not here to buy your life, Eva," he added gently. "I'm here to offer a little light where you gave me shelter." She sighed. "You really talk like a billionaire now." That made him smile. "Old habits." There was a long pause. Then she looked at him, her eyes searching. "If I say yes, what does that mean?" He shrugged lightly. "I hire a team to fix up the diner. A new roof, maybe working ovens, no strings, no ownership, just repayment." "No debt," she said carefully. "No debt," he confirmed. She studied him another moment. "Then fine, the diner, but nothing more." He extended his hand. "Deal." He shook it reluctantly. His grip was warm, firm, familiar. She pulled away quickly, unsure why her chest felt so tight. He lingered a moment longer. "And Eva?" She looked up. "You weren't just a stranger to me. You were the reason I got up the next day." The words hit her harder than she expected. He left a crisp business card on the counter and walked out. The bell above the door jingled behind him, leaving silence in his wake. Eva stood there, holding the card, her heart racing. Outside, the sleek car pulled away, kicking up dust. But in its place, something had shifted. Not just in the diner, but inside her. Later that evening, she watched the crew Gabriel had promised show up. No cameras, no publicity. Just quiet workers replacing broken parts of her world. She stepped onto the porch and saw the new sign being hung. Eva's Place, Eston. 2004, rebuilt 2. Her eyes stung. Inside, she found herself staring at the business card again. Gabriel Cross. No title, no company name, just a phone number, and below it, a handwritten note. "I don't repay debts with money, I repay them with gratitude. Let me know if you'll ever let me try again." Eva folded the card and slipped it into her apron pocket. She wasn't ready to let anyone in again. But something in her, something deep, had begun to stir. The morning after Gabriel offered to fix up the diner, Eva stood at the counter, her hands wrapped tightly around a chipped mug of coffee. The sun filtered through the dusty windows, revealing more flaws in the building than she wanted to admit. Peeling paint, sagging shelves, a flickering sign outside. She'd kept the place running with duct tape and hope. But now the hope came, dressed in a pressed white shirt and tailored slacks. Gabriel arrived just after 7. No entourage, no cameras. Just him. Taller than she remembered, even more out of place in her world than 2 years ago. Still, when he stepped through the door, he smiled at her like they shared some long-held secret. "I brought help," he said, gesturing behind him. "A contractor, An electrician, a local carpenter Eva recognized from down the road. "You weren't kidding," she muttered. "I don't kid about second chances," Gabriel replied. She almost laughed, almost. Instead, she watched as the men fanned out, examining the diner's broken corners, aged wiring, and creaky floorboards. Gabriel rolled up his sleeves and joined them, asking questions, jotting notes. Eva didn't know what stunned her more, that a millionaire was fixing her place, or that he looked like he belonged here now, sleeves rolled to the elbow, focused and present. Over the next few days, the diner transformed. The sagging roof was reinforced. New light fixtures bathed the room in soft warmth. The sign outside now glowed again, Eva's Diner like it hadn't in years. Gabriel worked harder than she expected. He wasn't just supervising, he got his hands dirty, literally. One afternoon, she caught him crouched under a sink, covered in grime, trying to fix a stubborn pipe with a grin that made her heart flutter in spite of herself. "You don't have to do this," she said softly from the doorway. "I want it," he answered, not looking up. "You gave me a roof when I had nothing. Let me give you one that doesn't leak." She said nothing, but inside something shifted. Each evening, after the workers left, they'd sit at the counter. He'd drink black coffee and she'd nibble on leftover biscuits. They'd talked, but never too much, just enough. About small things, the weather, a favorite song, her peach trees that refused to bloom last. Never about who he was or who he used to be. But the air between them thickened, with unspoken things, with something close to longing. Still, distance lingered, not the physical kind, the kind that came with pasts neither of them fully revealed. One night, as thunder rumbled in the distance and the wind brushed against the windows, Eva asked, "Why did you come back?" She finished. Gabriel looked up from his cup. His gaze, steady and deep, met hers. "Because I couldn't forget the way you looked at me. Like I wasn't broken, like I was worth saving." Eva's breath caught. She looked away. "I didn't even know your name," she whispered. "You knew my eyes," he replied. She couldn't argue with that. But even as the diner healed, Eva's heart stayed guarded. She had built a life on silence, on keeping the world at arm's length. Letting Gabriel in meant tearing down walls she'd spent years building. And she wasn't sure she had the strength to do it. Not again. 2 weeks passed. The diner was nearly finished, bright, warm, full of life again, the kind of place Eva had once dreamed of. But instead of relief, she felt something else, dread, because with every passing day, Gabriel was becoming part of her world, and part of her heart. And she didn't know how to survive that kind of closeness again. He noticed, of course he did. One morning, as the sun spilled gold over the parking lot and a light breeze stirred the scent of cinnamon rolls cooling on the sill, Gabriel leaned against the counter and asked, "Have I overstepped?" Eva turned to face him, brows drawn. "What do you mean?" "Of this." He gestured gently around the space. "Fixing the diner, being here every day. I don't want to make you uncomfortable." Uncomfortable wasn't the word for it. Terrified was closer. Ash said quickly, "I mean, you've helped more than I can ever repay. Her voice faltered. "I've spent so long keeping people out. It's the only way I know how to stay standing." Gabriel's voice was soft. "What if I'm not asking you to fall, Eva? What if I'm offering you someone to lean on?" Her throat tightened. She turned away, pretending to clean a spot on the already spotless counter. That night, a few of the diner's regulars stopped by to celebrate the reopening. Gabriel stayed, sitting quietly in the corner while Eva moved from table to table. She laughed, but he could see it. The way her shoulders tensed every time someone asked about her past or commented on the stranger who had made her diner shine again. "Lucky," one man whispered to another. "Most people like her don't get that kind of help." Gabriel's jaw cloaked. Most people like her. He waited until the place cleared out. Eva was wiping down tables when he approached. "I heard what he said," Gabriel began. She looked up slowly, meeting his gaze. Her eyes were tired. "It's not the first time. Won't be the last." "It shouldn't happen at all," he said firmly. "They don't know what you've been through." She paused. "And you do?" His silence stretched. She sighed. Look, I'm grateful. I really am. But maybe this was all too much. Too fast? Gabriel stepped closer. Eva, don't, she said, voice trembling. Please, don't make this harder than it already is. He nodded once. The distance between them widened with that single movement. He left that evening without another word. And Eva, standing in the newly restored diner, surrounded by everything she thought she wanted, had never felt more alone. The next morning, he didn't come. Nor the day after. By the third morning, the ache in her chest had rooted itself deep. She told herself it was for the best, until she found the letter tucked beneath the old biscuit tin behind the counter. I wanted to fix what was broken. Not just your diner, but the silence in your life, the weight behind your eyes. I didn't expect anything from you, I still don't, but if one day you find yourself ready to stop standing alone, I'll be waiting. Her fingers trembled as she folded the note back up. Outside, the sky was clear. A soft wind brushed past the trees, lifting the edge of the letter in her hand. Maybe the storm had passed? But the distance still remained. The sound of hammers and drills echoed across the sleepy roadside lot as Gabriel's team began transforming the old diner. It started with new signage, simple, elegant, yet still keeping the name Eva's father had painted decades ago. He didn't ask her permission for every detail, but somehow he knew just where to draw the line. Eva stood by the kitchen window in her apron, watching workers repaint the chipped window frames. Every nail driven into the wood made her stomach twist. It wasn't that she didn't appreciate the help, it was the questions, the quiet, gnawing ones. Why now? Why her? Inside, the booth seats were reupholstered, a new espresso machine gleamed under the fluorescent lights. The ancient jukebox, once more silent than not now, played soft jazz on a working rotation. Locals started showing up more often, drawn by curiosity, and stayed because of the atmosphere. And him. Gabriel Cross. In a fitted black coat, his presence turned heads. He held open doors, greeted everyone with a respectful nod, but never lingered with anyone but Eva. When townspeople whispered, it wasn't out of rudeness, it was wonder. Is that the guy from Silicon Valley? One older couple asked, sipping coffee. No way. What would a tech billionaire be doing in a place like this? The waitress muttered. Eva heard it all and said nothing. Each evening after closing, Gabriel stayed behind while she prepped pies for the next day. Her peach slices glistened with sugar and cinnamon under the dim kitchen lights. He peeled apples beside her without asking. No words, just silence and warmth. But the questions clawed their way back in. You're alone, aren't you? She asked one night, wiping flour from her palms. He paused, then softly answered, because I never forgot the woman who pulled me from the dirt and didn't ask for anything. That doesn't explain why you care now. Gabriel looked down at the mixing bowl, then at her. I care because for 2 years, for your life is the real thing I had. Eva didn't know what to say to that. Later that night, while scraping the last of the crust into a pie tin, she dared another question. Who were you running from? He didn't answer at first. Instead, he washed his hands slowly, drying them on a towel by the sink. Finally, he turned toward her. I was running from myself, he said, from a man I didn't want to become, and from someone powerful enough to ruin me if I didn't disappear. Eva looked up at him, her eyes unreadable. I'm not innocent, Eva. She let the pie tin drop gently into the oven tray. Neither am I. Their eyes locked in the silence that followed, not with fear, but something deeper. Two people weathered by storms, finally finding someone who didn't look away. The air between them stayed still for a long moment, thick with something neither of them could name. Gabriel reached for the second pie tin, but Eva gently took it from him. I've got it, she whispered, sliding it into the oven. Why don't you lock up for the night? Gabriel nodded, not pressing, not retreating. He moved through the diner like a man walking through memory, pausing by the booth where she had first served him pie, brushing a hand across the counter she had once scrubbed alone. Outside, the gravel crunched under the tires of his sleek car, but he didn't drive off. Instead, he sat inside, watching the porch light of the farmhouse flicker in the wind. Something about that light had haunted him since he'd first opened his eyes 2 years ago in that guest bed. Inside the house, Eva sat on her bed, holding the note he had left back then. It was worn now, folded too many times. "You saved more than my life," it read. And yet, she had never truly known what he meant. Until tonight. The next morning brought more renovations and more whispers. 2 women from the town leaned in the doorway, peeking into the newly polished dining area. "Did you see the car he drives?" one of them murmured. "He's got to be someone. And what's he doing around Eva?" Cali, Colombia. Eva heard them, but didn't flinch. She'd learned long ago how to let voices pass through her. But what bothered her wasn't what they were saying, it was that she didn't have an answer either. Gabriel arrived carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee from the cafe across town. "Peace offering," he said. "I have coffee, but not one that tastes like forgiveness," he replied with a half smile, offering it to her. Eva hesitated, then took it. "Is that what I'm supposed to be offering you?" Gabriel's smile faded into something more honest. "I think we're both still figuring out what we're offering each other." That night, the power flickered from a passing storm. The staff had left, and the last customers had driven home. Eva stood at the front of the diner, watching the lightning roll across the open sky. Gabriel came up behind her, his voice, "You always want to know more? I didn't." She turned slowly. "I didn't think you wanted to be found." Their silence wasn't cold. It was filled with years of unspoken things. Eva leaned back against the counter, arms folded. "Somehow, I knew you would eventually. I waited by the barn for 3 nights, she said. "I thought maybe you'd come back. Even just for your coat." Gabriel swallowed hard. "I wanted to, but I thought I'd only bring trouble. I didn't think I deserved to be remembered." Eva's voice was barely a whisper. "I remembered you every day." The storm outside cracked louder than before, but inside, something gentler stirred. Gabriel stepped closer, not touching, just present. "Then let me stay," he said softly. "Not as a stranger, but as a man who's tired of running." Eva didn't answer, but she didn't send him away either. And somehow, that said everything. The morning sun spilled golden light across the hills, casting a warm glow over the freshly painted sign that now hung proudly above the little roadside diner, Eva's Table. The final touches were in place: fresh sunflowers in vases, new silverware gleaming, a bell above the door chiming softly as the first curious customers arrived. Eva stood behind the counter, hands trembling slightly. She wore her mother's old floral dress, faded but timeless. The scent of cinnamon from the fresh peach pie filled the air, mingling with the buttery aroma of fried dough and coffee. Her heart pounded as more cars began pulling in, filling the gravel lot. Locals, news crews, and travelers, all drawn by the quiet buzz surrounding the diner's rebirth. Gabriel entered quietly through the back, rolled-up sleeves and an apron slung over one shoulder. He looked at her, really looked at her, and her moment, he didn't move. Her dark curls pinned up. That dress. The way she stood tall despite everything. "You look like your mama must have been something fierce," he said softly. Eva smiled, nervous but touched. She would have had words about this crowd. "She'd have been proud of you," he added. By noon, the place was full. Gabriel moved between tables, pouring coffee, cracking jokes. It shocked the regulars. This man, who once commanded boardrooms, now asking, "More sugar or cream?" with a boyish grin. Eva moved like magic through the space, greeting names she knew since childhood, handing out biscuits to toddlers, comforting an elderly couple who'd lost their usual cafe during the pandemic. Her eyes often flicked toward Gabriel, watching, wondering, what was he really doing here? Still no last name, no full answers, just presence. And purpose? The local paper sent a young reporter. Cameras rolled as she interviewed patrons. Everyone praised the food, the warmth, and the odd chemistry between the owner and her mysterious business partner. Gabriel stepped back from the limelight, letting Eva shine. That evening, After the rush died down, string lights twinkled outside behind the diner. A soft breeze rustled the cornfields beyond. The two of them stood beneath the glow, alone for the first time since the doors opened. "I never thought I'd see this place full again," Eva said, wiping her hands on a towel, looking up at the stars. "I never thought I'd still be standing," Gabriel replied, voice lower, more real. "But you pulled me out of something I never named." There was silence, not awkward, just charged. He reached for her hand. "Dance with me." "I don't know how." "Then we'll sway." With a slow step, he pulled her close. The night whispered around them, cicadas humming, old blues playing faintly from the radio inside. She felt his hand settle gently at her waist. The other clasped him her heart. Her heartbeat was a drum in her chest. "You kissed me once," Gabriel murmured. She looked up, confused. "No, I didn't." "You did without lips. That night you dragged me in from the cold. That was a kind of kiss no one forgets." He leaned in, close enough for her breath to catch. Eva didn't pull away. Their lips met, soft, unsure at first, then firmer, slower, like rain on dry earth. When they parted, she blinked up at him. "What do you want from me?" she whispered, trembling slightly. Gabriel brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "Just a chance, like the one you gave me." She stepped back slightly, unsure, her hand still in his. "Don't make me regret trusting you." "You won't." Just then, headlights swept across the lot. A black envelope had been placed on the diner's porch. Eva picked it up slowly. Inside, sealed documents, old records, legal files. Gabriel looked away, jaw tight. "It's time you knew the truth. About what happened to your father's land?" Eva froze. "I didn't just come back for you. I came back to finish what they started." Eva turned the pages slowly, each one a ghost dragged from her past. County permits, land assessments, corporate signatures. Her father's name, scrawled in fading ink, next to legal jargon she couldn't decipher. But Gabriel could. He pointed to one section. "This is where they broke him," he said quietly. "They claimed water contamination, forced a shutdown, but it was fabricated. The soil tests were falsified. They wanted the land." Eva's fingers trembled. "That's why we lost everything." Gabriel nodded. "They used eminent domain laws illegally, then ran a pipeline through it for private tech infrastructure. No compensation, no apology, just silence." She swallowed the lump in her throat, voice cracking. "My dad thought he failed us." "He didn't," Gabriel said gently. "They did. And now you know." She looked at him, really looked at him, this man who showed up bleeding in the night, who rebuilt her diner, who kissed her like he knew her soul, and who now held the proof of everything she'd lost. "You're bringing this?" she asked. "Why now?" Gabriel hesitated. "Because the company that did this to you is the same one I blew the whistle on. The night I almost died. It's all connected, Eva. You were part of it before you ever met me." She stepped back, breath caught in her throat. The betrayal, the grief, the tangled web, it all started to make horrifying sense. He moved toward her, slow and steady. "I couldn't forget your face, not that night behind the barn, and not ever since." She let herself lean into him for a breath. Not for comfort, but for truth. "I fight this," she whispered. He nodded. "Together." That night, she didn't sleep. Neither did Gabriel. He took the couch, though she hadn't asked. Rain tapped against the windows again, like it had that first night, but this time, she wasn't alone in the storm. By morning, the media buzz had caught on. The diner's reopening was now a national curiosity. People didn't just come for the pie, they came to see Eva and the man no one could fully name. Still, she kept her head down. Gabriel too. But something shifted between them. A quiet understanding, a partnership forged not in comfort, but in fire. Lucas, a boy who'd once stopped by for grilled cheese with his grandfather, now handed Eva a flower and said, "You looked like a princess yesterday." She laughed, ruffled his hair. "Even in a kitchen apron?" He grinned. "Especially." Gabriel watched her from the corner of the diner, hand around a cup of coffee gone cold. Later that afternoon, Eva stepped outside to catch her breath. Gabriel followed, standing beside her beneath the shade of the old oak tree where her father once fixed tractors. "Here's one more thing," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "That doesn't sound good." Gabriel pulled a USB drive from his pocket. "This holds everything I have: documents, testimonies, footage, the company's secrets, yours and mine. It could expose them, but it could also get us both sued, or worse." Eva looked at it, then at him. "We started this with silence," she said. "Let's end it with truth." He smiled. "Then we go public?" She nodded. "We go public." He held the USB in his hand a moment longer, then placed it in hers. "You ready?" he asked. "Even a little," she admitted. "But I've never been more sure." Their fingers brushed. No kiss this time, just certainty. The diner behind them bustled, but ahead, storm or no storm, they were stepping into a fire that had once burned them both. Only now, they would walk through it together. The morning sun was harsh, almost too bright against the dusty windows of the diner. Eva stood at the counter, staring at the envelope Gabriel had slid across the table. Inside were the official documents, drafts of the lawsuit they were about to file together. It wasn't just a legal battle, it was everything she had spent years trying to protect him, everything he had nearly died protecting. Their names were there in black ink, side by side, plaintiffs, fighters, survivors. Gabriel sat across from her, his coffee untouched. "This will get ugly," he said quietly. Eva met his eyes. For years, the tech giant they were suing had not only covered up corruption that decimated her family's farm, but had also tried to kill Gabriel when he exposed their secrets. The sealed documents he'd handed her that night, the ones left like a ghost's confession, were now evidence. With them, they had a chance. Within hours of filing, the media caught on. Gabriel's name exploded across headlines. Whistleblower returns from the dead. Paparazzi swarmed the road near the diner. News vans camped on the edge of the property, waiting for a glimpse of the elusive man or the woman beside him. Eva stayed inside the diner, apron on, flipping pancakes with shaking hands. Her photo surfaced next, an old image from a protest 5 years earlier. The narrative twisted quickly. Radical farm girl stirs up trouble with disgraced CEO. She was branded a rebel, a liability. The woman behind the counter was no longer invisible. That night, the crowd outside doubled. A reporter screamed questions as Gabriel exited the diner. Why her? Is she hiding something too? He didn't answer, but inside, he found Eva sitting alone, trembling. "You're not wrong," she whispered. "I did protest. I shouted. I broke things. I wasn't just grieving. I was furious." Gabriel kneeled in front of her. "And you were right. They poisoned your land, killed your father's dream, and silenced your truth. Don't apologize for surviving." Scared. Her voice cracked. "You're already giving them a story. I'll make it worse." He reached for her hands. "Eva, you gave me shelter when the world left me bleeding behind your barn. I'll give you protection now. Whatever storm comes, we'll face it together." The next day, they arrived at the courthouse in Los Angeles for a key hearing. Security surrounded them. Reporters called out, cameras flashed, and legal teams huddled in corners. Gabriel stayed quiet until the judge called their case forward. As they stepped into the courtroom, Eva noticed Gabriel's hand tremble slightly. At first, she thought it was nerves. But by the time they were seated at the front, his face had gone pale. He gripped the edge of the table with white-knuckled fingers, beads of sweat gathering at his temple. Then, without warning, Gabriel collapsed. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The judge banged her gavel. EMTs rushed in as chaos erupted around them. Eva dropped to her knees beside him, calling his name over and over. He blinked up at her, barely conscious. "It's the old injury. Stress. I thought I could manage." "Stop talking," she said through tears. "You need help." In the ambulance, she held his hand tightly, ignoring the photographers tailing the emergency vehicle. He drifted in and out, murmuring things she couldn't always understand, but one sentence burned into her memory. "I lose everything again," he whispered. "I want to lose it with you." Eva didn't answer right away. She sat there, absorbing the words. Then she bent forward and whispered back, "You're not alone this time. Not now. Not ever." The hospital smelled like antiseptic and humming machines. Eva sat beside Gabriel's bed, her fingers wrapped around his, never letting go. A thin line of sunlight crept in through the blinds as the monitors beeped quietly around them. The doctor had explained it was a combination of stress and an untreated internal tear from his old injury, one that never fully healed because he had kept running. "You're lucky," the doctor said earlier. "If you'd waited another day, it might have been fatal." Eva stayed silent through it all, but inside, fear wrapped around her ribs like iron bands. She remembered that night behind the barn. How she had pulled a bleeding man from the mud and thought he might die in her arms. That same man now lay in a sterile room, still fighting. Still hers, even if he didn't know how to say it yet. When Gabriel stirred, his eyelids fluttering open, she leaned closer. "You scared me," she whispered. "I didn't mean to," he croaked, voice rough. "I thought I could power through." "You always think that," she said gently, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "But maybe it's time you let someone carry the weight with you." He turned his head to face her. "And maybe it's time I stop hiding the pain, not just in my body, but in my past." Eva nodded. "I've been hiding too, behind my father's legacy, behind this diner, pretending it was enough just to survive." He smiled faintly. "You gave me a place to heal before I even knew who I was. That barn, that room, they were the first home I had in years." They sat in silence for a while, hands clasped, hearts full of unspoken truths. The lawsuit loomed. The world outside hadn't paused, even though everything in this small room had. Eva scrolled through her phone, headlines swirled with fury. The tech conglomerate was launching a smear campaign. A news anchor claimed Gabriel faked his injuries for sympathy. Another hinted Eva was manipulating him for fame. She turned the screen toward him. "They're trying to bury us." His jaw tightened. "Let them try." Later that day, the nurse brought in a tray of bland food. Gabriel pushed it aside. "I want pie." Eva laughed softly. "You're in no condition to eat peach pie." "I want to smell home again," he said. "I want to remember what safety tasted like." The next morning, she brought a slice from the diner, her mother's recipe, warm and golden. Gabriel took one bite and closed his eyes. "That's better than morphine," he whispered. When he was strong enough to sit up, Eva placed a folder in his lap. Inside were letters from townspeople, thank you notes, words of support, and stories of families also hurt by the same tech company. One note read, "Your courage is giving us our voices back." Gabriel's throat tightened as he turned the pages. "We're not just fighting for ourselves." Eva sat beside him. "No, we're fighting for the truth, for everyone who never got their day in court." 2 days later, as they left the hospital together, flashbulbs exploded outside. Gabriel didn't flinch. He held Eva's hand, lifted it, and kissed her knuckles in full view of the crowd. A reporter shouted, "Mr. Cross, do you still plan to testify?" Gabriel looked straight into the camera and said, "I've already survived death once. I can survive the truth." Eva smiled, and for the first time since the stormy night she found him bleeding behind her barn, she didn't feel like a girl barely holding her world together. She felt like a woman walking beside someone who saw her, truly saw her, and would never let her stand alone again. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled with journalists, locals, and those who had followed the trial since the first headlines broke. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but the air buzzed with a pressure heavier than the storm that once brought Gabriel to Eva's barn. Gabriel sat at the witness stand, his face pale but composed. His lawyer gave a slight nod. Then Gabriel looked at the judge and began. "I was presumed dead after a car crash engineered to silence me," he said calmly. "I didn't die, but I lost everything. My company, my name, my future. I ran, until she found me." He nodded toward Eva, sitting straight-backed in a modest navy dress, hands clenched tightly in her lap. She met his gaze, silent, steady. "I never meant to drag her into my fight," Gabriel continued, but she gave me sanctuary without knowing who I was. She didn't ask for credentials. She saw a man bleeding behind her barn and saved him. She didn't just save my life, she gave me something worth living for it. The prosecution shifted uncomfortably, but they couldn't shake what followed. Documents, leaked files, and a series of internal memos showing Gabriel's claims were true. The tech company had funneled money into silencing dissenters. Gabriel had tried to stop them, and they nearly buried him for it. Then it was Eva's turn. She stepped forward slowly, heels echoing against the polished floor. Her voice trembled as she began. My name is Eva Flores. My father was a farmer who lost everything when that same company contaminated our land and denied responsibility. Her voice grew firmer. We protested, we pleaded. I got arrested once for standing outside their corporate office. They painted me as a rebel, unstable, a girl who didn't understand business. She looked at the jury. But I understood something else, what it means to watch everything you love be taken and be told you don't matter. I've worked my whole life trying to rebuild what we lost, and then Gabriel walked into my diner. Murmurs rippled across the courtroom. I didn't know his name then, Eva said, but I saw the same pain in him that I felt. I didn't plan to fall in love with him, but I did, because he never saw me as less. He believed I deserved to be heard. She ended her statement with tears in her eyes, but her voice never cracked. This isn't just our story, it's the story of everyone who's been told to stay quiet. And today, we won't. By the end of her testimony, the jury was silent, moved, some visibly emotional. The trial stretched into late afternoon, but the verdict didn't take long. The judge's gavel came down with a thud that echoed through the chamber. The court finds in favor of the plaintiffs. The defendants are fined $48 million in damages and are ordered to cease operations pending federal investigation. A collective gasp filled the room. Gabriel closed his eyes, exhaling for the first time in what felt like years. Eva turned to him just as he opened his eyes. He reached for her hand. She didn't let go. Outside the courthouse, the world erupted. Reporters surged forward. Microphones were thrust toward Gabriel and Eva, their names now trending across every platform. But neither of them stopped for interviews. Not today. Not when everything had just changed. They slipped through the side entrance, away from the cameras, into the calm of the evening. The sky, for the first time in days, was clear and the world's most. Back at the diner, the windows were dark, the doors locked, but the air still smelled faintly of cinnamon and warm pie crusts. Gabriel turned to Eva with a quiet smile and said, "Come with me, there's somewhere I want to go." She followed him in silence as he led her out past the diner and down the gravel path behind the barn. The place where two lives collided in a storm, where he almost died, and she risked everything to save him. Gabriel opened the creaky door. Moonlight spilled through the cracks in the roof, casting silver stripes across the floorboards. The old cot was still in the corner. Dusty, faded, but still there. He stood in the center of the barn and looked around, then at her. "This," he said softly, "was my grave. That night, I had nothing left. I didn't want to live. I didn't believe there was anything worth saving." He stepped closer, his voice thick with emotion. "But you saw something in me when I didn't. You didn't ask me who I was, where I came from. You didn't demand answers. You gave me shelter, when all I had was shame." Eva's throat tightened. She looked at the very spot where he had collapsed that night, unconscious and broken. "I thought I was saving a stranger," she whispered. "I didn't know I was saving my future." Gabriel reached into his coat and pulled out something small, familiar. The note. Same note he had left on her kitchen table when he disappeared 2 years ago. She gasped softly as he unfolded it, worn and creased from time. "You saved more than my life," he wrote aloud. "I didn't understand how true that was until now." He held her hands in his. "Eva, we fought, we bled, we lost, but we won. Not just the lawsuit, we won back our voices, our names. And he paused, searching her eyes, "I don't want to lose you." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't blink them away. This barn, he continued, was supposed to be the end, but because of you, it became my beginning. She stepped forward until they were inches apart. The wind shifted outside, rustling the trees like a soft breath. He cupped her face gently. "So, what now?" she asked, her voice trembling. Gabriel smiled. "Now," he whispered, "we live together." And then he kissed her, not with desperation, not with uncertainty, but with something stronger, steadier. A kiss born not from a night of chaos, but from every moment that followed, every struggle, every truth, every quiet act of grace between them. When they finally pulled apart, Eva leaned into his chest and closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she had to carry everything alone. And in the stillness of the barn, under the moonlight and memories, two survivors stood, no longer broken, no longer afraid. Just beginning. The diner was quiet at dawn, bathed in soft gold from the rising sun. Eva stood at the window, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee, eyes fixed on the weathered wooden sign hanging just above the door. Mabel's pie stopped. Her mother's name, her mother's legacy, a name that had carried grief and resilience in equal parts. Behind her, Gabriel stirred. He came out of the kitchen, wearing an apron far too clean for someone who'd been experimenting with biscuit recipes. He placed a warm plate beside her, fluffy, steaming, with just the right amount of butter melting on top. "First trial batch," he said. "I followed your recipe to the letter." Eva smiled faintly. "Did you ignore the second half, like my dad always did?" "I might have," improvised the cinnamon. She laughed softly, then turned serious again. "You sure about today?" she asked. "About what it means?" Gabriel stepped closer, standing beside her. "It's not just your diner anymore," he said gently. "It's our life, our story. It deserves a name that reflects all of it." She looked back at the sign. For years, she couldn't bear to change it. It felt like erasing her parents. But now, she understood something deeper. Honoring the past didn't mean clinging to it. Outside, the small gravel lot was already filling. A mix of locals and travelers, all coming for the grand reopening under its newest name. Eva stepped outside, Gabriel following close behind. A local artist stood with a brush in hand and a cloth draped over the new sign. Eva hesitated, heart pounding, not with fear, but with the weight of generations. "Ready?" Gabriel asked. She nodded. The cloth came off, revealing bold, elegant letters carved into polished wood. Eva and Rose Cafe. Gasps came from the crowd, then applause. Some smiled, recognizing the names. Others simply felt the warmth in the simplicity of it. Rivera, his real name. Hers too, in a way now. Rose for the bloom she always imagined her mother's name could become. Inside the diner, Eva's eyes swept over everything that had changed. Booths refurbished, old newspaper clippings framed along the wall. One from her father's protests, another from Gabriel's trial testimony. The kitchen hummed with fresh energy. Employees laughed while preparing orders, mixing the smell of fried eggs with vanilla and sugar. At the far end of the room, Lucas, the youngest of the youngers, who often came for free pie, drew a picture of the diner with crayons. Above it, he wrote, "Home." Eva felt Gabriel's hand gently brush hers. "I've been thinking," he said. "We never really celebrated." "Celebrated what?" she asked, turning toward him. He reached into his jacket pocket. The ring box was simple, worn leather, no fanfare. He froze. "Because you saved me, not because I owe you," he said softly, "but because I want to build a life with you. Because every morning I've woken up here has felt more real than the years I spent in suits and skyscrapers." Tears welled in Eva's eyes. "And because," he added, lowering to one knee, right in the middle of the diner, "you're the strongest, kindest woman I've ever known. Eva Rose, will you marry me?" The room went silent, even the clatter of forks paused. She smiled, the kind that carried both joy and relief. She whispered, choking on the word but meaning it with every heartbeat. "Yes." Cheers erupted inside the diner, but Eva only heard the sound of her own breath. Shaky, full, alive. Gabriel stood, slipping the ring onto her finger. and for a moment the past no longer held her down. Her parents, the debt, the quiet pain she'd carried since she was a teenager, it all lifted with one word. Outside, the local string band began playing. A soft country melody floated through the open windows as the sun climbed higher. The official celebration had begun. They hosted the gathering in the back garden, behind the barn, the very place where their story had started 2 years ago during a thunderstorm that changed everything. The barn was now repainted and framed with twinkle lights. Tables had been set with checkered cloths, fresh pies, and hand-picked flowers from Eva's garden. Gabriel raised a toast as the guests gathered. To Eva, who turned a dying diner into a sanctuary, who gave me back my name, my strength, and something I didn't think I deserved, a second life. Eva raised her glass, too, her voice quiet but firm. And to Gabriel, who taught me that grisette yourself doesn't mean closing your heart. That sometimes, the storm that breaks you also brings someone home. Applause, warm and easy, followed. Later that night, under a sky full of stars, Gabriel led her back to the barn doors. A quiet space, just the two of them. "I still remember how you looked that night," he said. "Barefoot, so stubborn." She smirked. "You were half dead and barely conscious. And you still dragged me inside. You didn't give me much choice." They laughed, then fell silent, the space between them filled with the memory of everything they'd endured. Corporate corruption, public trial, loss, and love. It had been a war neither of them planned for, yet somehow they had emerged from it not just survivors but builders of something new. Gabriel held her hands. "There's one more thing I want to do." He reached into his coat again, pulling out a folded document. Eva opened it slowly. Her breath caught when she saw what it was. "Your father's land title," he said. "Cleared, returned in your name. It's officially yours again." Her hand flew to her mouth. "How did you—" "You said you lost everything. I wanted to give back what I could." Tears slipped down her cheeks, quiet and fast. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," he whispered. "You're not just the girl who saved me. You're the woman who changed what I believe in." She threw her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. "Welcome home," he whispered into her hair. At that moment, young Lucas ran up from the yard, holding a small wooden plaque. "Look what I made," he said proudly. It read, "The Rivera family." Eva knelt, pulling Lucas into a hug. "That's beautiful." He looked up at her with big eyes. "Can I call you Mama now?" Her breath caught. The world stilled. She touched his cheek, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I've waited my whole life for that." The three of them stood there in the soft night air. One former runaway, one forgotten farmer's daughter, and one boy who had never truly known family until now. From a distance, the camera crew filming the reopening caught a final shot. The wooden sign above the diner swaying gently in the breeze. Rivera and Rose Cafe. No longer just a place to eat. It was a place to begin again. A home. And for the first time in years, Eva Rose knew her name finally meant something more than loss. It meant love.